But first of all, we're going to go to Mark Regev, who's the senior advisor to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and a former ambassador to the United Kingdom. Mr. Regev, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I want to ask you specifically about the Al-Shifa hospital and what is actually happening there, because the IDF have said they've gone in and they have proven that this was being used as a command centre by Hamas. Hamas say, no, they haven't. This is actually what's been going on there is a war crime, a deliberate attack on a hospital. I've got to say that so far, the evidence that the IDF has published in terms of videos and pictures and so on, I don't think it's overly compelling. It doesn't look to me like a command centre. It looks to me like a hospital which has got uniforms and some military hardware and some firearms and so on. But it doesn't look to me like the central hub for Hamas in Gaza.
So patience, we'll be providing more information as it becomes available. Not all the information we have at the moment we can make public, and I can understand why you want to see it. But let's be clear, it's not just the government of Israel that says Hamas has a command and control and its military network underneath the hospital. The US government said it 2 days ago, the Pentagon and the White House. And the truth is that the people who live there in the region, in the city of Gaza, the Palestinians themselves there, it's the worst kept secret that Hamas has. Everybody knows that Hamas has a military structure under the hospital.
I mean, the reason it's so important is, as you know, Article 19 of the Geneva Convention, which is what governs the way warfare is conducted, says the protection to which civilian hospitals are entitled shall not cease unless they are used to commit, outside the humanitarian duties, acts harmful to the enemy. Protection may, however, cease only after due warning has been given, naming in all appropriate cases a reasonable time limit, and after such warning has remained unheeded. So is your position that Israel has meticulously stuck by the letter of that article of the Geneva Convention in relation to the Al-Shifa hospital?
100%. 100%. We've given adequate warning. We've urged civilians to leave the area. We've done so, I think, 3.5 weeks ago, we started asking civilians to leave. And the truth is, Piers, the overwhelming majority of civilians have left. Some 1 million people have left that area of northern Gaza, have heeded our advice, moved south, out of harm's way, because we didn't want to see them caught up in the crossfire between the Israeli Defense Forces and the terrorists of Hamas.
What do you say to somebody like me, who has spent 6 weeks now debating this, who believes October the 7th was one of the worst terror attacks of modern times, that Israel absolutely has not only a right to defend itself, but a fundamental duty to its people to protect them, particularly given the Hamas spokesman last week said, we're going to try and do this again and again and again. That is an existential threat to Israel. I get that. I believe Hamas has to be removed. It cannot be removed peacefully. It has to be removed militarily, in my estimation. But the question then becomes, how much of the civilian casualties that we're seeing becomes too much? Not just for Israel and any moral line that you may have here, but for the wider international community, which is already, as we're seeing in England today, there's been a big vote in Parliament, many people resigning from the Labour shadow bench because of what's going on and wanting a ceasefire. What do you say to people like me that believe that you are right in principle, but that the execution of what is happening in Gaza is getting so bad that it borders on unjustified?
So the first thing I would argue is it's crucial that we get rid of Hamas. We saw the sort of violence Hamas is capable of inflicting upon innocent civilians. You yourself just said October 7th was horrific and brutal, and it's clear that we cannot tolerate the continued existence of this terror enclave on our southern frontier. Israeli parents should not have to live in fear of terrorists crossing the border in the middle of the night and murdering their children. So getting rid of Hamas is the aim. Now, if it was possible to send a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations and say, please demilitarize Gaza and get rid of Hamas, I'd like to do it that way to be easier for everyone. But that's just not a realistic option. We have to send our troops in, and we have to dismantle through a military conflict the Hamas's military machine. There's no alternative. If you have another alternative, I'm happy to hear it. Now, we've made maximum efforts to reduce the numbers of civilian casualties. We really have tried. It's very difficult because Hamas has embedded itself, as we see with the hospital, inside civilian structures. It uses Gaza's civilians as a human shield. Nonetheless, because of our warnings, some 1 million northern Gazans have fled the northern Gaza Strip, moved to the south, which is safer than the north. And we are still making a maximum effort today to distinguish between those civilians who've remained, who are not our target, and the Hamas terrorists. But Piers, you've been around. You know that there hasn't been a war in modern history where civilians haven't been caught up in crossfire.
No, that is true. Here's what I would say to that. Here's what I would say. I heard Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's Middle East editor today, saying he hasn't seen devastation of the kind that's happened in Gaza, which he's now witnessed, since Aleppo, after the Russians had been in. And that was apocalyptic. And I guess my question for you is, you've persuaded 1 million Gazans to head south. What are they coming back to? Everything that they had is being disintegrated. It's just being vaporized. There's nothing left for these people to come back to, is there?
I agree. And it's clear that when this is over, Gaza will have to become demilitarized, de-radicalized, and rebuilt. And ultimately, though I know it's very difficult for the civilian population of Gaza who are going through what is a traumatic experience, they're going through a war. It's not easy, I understand that. But ultimately, when this is over, it will be better for them too. What has 16 years of Hamas rule brought the people of Gaza? Bloodshed, suffering, impoverishment. Hamas has nothing to show for its time in government except for those bad things. The people of Gaza also deserve better than the current dictatorial terrorist regime that has ruled them.